Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'm just checking out my OBS here, whatever it is. Um, yeah. Well, this I don't know what this live stream is called. I guess it's called anything. Whatever. Anyways, I was gonna name it Evolution is Mythology. At least the pharaohs is real history. At least the Bible is real history. At least Zeus was probably a real person. At least Thor was probably a real person. But evolution is all fantasy. Nothing about it is real. It's all imagined. It's all fantasy. And I would like to extend an open invitation to anyone, especially scientists, to have a formal, informal debate or discussion, probably better discussion, to see if you can answer for your baseless belief. See if you have any basis whatsoever for believing that things can get written instructions that aren't there in the genome, that aren't already there in the genome. We know the same. We know the story. We know all about the duplication of information that's already there. It never writes instruction that's not there. It duplicates what's already there and usually causes problems, or often causes problems, not always, but it doesn't write instruction that's not there. And each living organism has its own set of instructions that no other organism has the way it has. And if you have evidence for, acquiring programming from thin air, I would like to see it, and I would invite you to come share that with us. But in the meantime, we will just all understand that it's fantasy and imagination, that you have no support whatsoever for your object credit giving belief, which is idolatry, giving glory to mindless matter instead of the maker of matter. You can't credit objects with doing anything because objects are forced to be what they are. The elements are forced to be what they are. They're made to do what they do, or given the properties that they have to do what they do, and they only do what, according to the properties, is what they have, what they are given, what they're forced to have. They never do anything with direction, purpose, or intent, so they never make any directed working mechanism. But I'd like to, give anybody, any scientist, a chance to defend his mythology. Hello, Jesus is Lord. How you doing? I'd like to have a formal debate, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that would like to have a formal debate or informal discussion with a scientist who can defend his idolatry his belief that matter does programming of living organisms. You got all these people looking for life in other planets. They have to find life on other planets, because to them it has to be there. Because we're here, it has to be there as well. So they just have to find it, because they have to support their belief that instruction comes from thin air, or thin space, whatever you want to call it. You know, it's just so annoying that you have these people that are supposed to be intelligent people, and they believe in a mythology, idolatry, lies, and nobody around them, I guess, puts them into check or questions them or says, wait a minute, well, this is not so. This can't be like this. You can't get direction from no direction, and you can't use directed things as evidence of no direction. No simple basic logic that people, that this greatest scientists in the world don't follow. And here they're believing in mythology. They're believing in their imagination. They believe in the millions and millions of years that you can have infinite possibilities in limited time and space, and the math doesn't support it at all. I mean, there are videos that do the math on infinite possibilities in limited time and space. It's just totally absurd. And the realm of infinite possibilities is the realm of God. It's not the realm of physical possibilities. But they think, they're appealing to infinite possibilities. And not just once, but thousands of times for each individual living organism, in the same place, on the same earth, between frying and freezing, where we happen to be. The evidence is overwhelming that they are just lost. The scientists are totally lost. And once in a while you have an Anthony Flew, or one person or another that is a scientist that will understand that you can't get programming for anything from mindless matter, because the properties of matter don't determine what the information is. Is, as one biologist pointed out, is that the DNA backbone is a sugar backbone, and the A, C, T, and G, or the phosphate, whatever they are, the ladder, they don't even touch each other. They bind to the sugar ladder, the backbone. They bind to the backbone, and so they can bind in any order, because they don't even touch each other. The order is not determined by the chemical structure. The order is determined by the pre-existing written programming. And of course with mistakes, and they think mistakes write programming. The unrelated mistakes are never going to write instruction that's not there, because they're mistakes and they're totally unrelated to each other, and they're totally unrelated to the instructions that are already there in the DNA. And they just think that modifying what's there, having more or less of what's there, is going to make a new organism, but it can't, because in order to have a new organism you have to have specific written instruction to be another organism, which involves the entire genome, not just unrelated mistakes. And that's what David Brzezinski or somebody was saying. They said when you talk about an animal going from a land animal to living in the ocean, you're talking everything has to change, everything. And he says it's just not possible, because you're relying on mistakes to make everything work in a completely different environment, which, you go from a hoofed air, air breathing or whatever animal, and turn it into a whale. It's just absurd to begin with, because there's not enough time to begin with, and even if there was enough time, it still wouldn't happen. And you're basically talking design, because you would have to extend billions of years and have an environment to be shaping the animal, which the environment doesn't do. It's the animal that shapes the environment. The environment doesn't shape the animal. It's the pre-existing instructions that have variation to adapt to the environment. It's not the environment that determines what the DNA is, because it is what it is, and it can't change what it is. It can only alter what it has in order to adapt to the environment. So what you will have is like a frog, and if the frog lives in a fast moving water for generation after generation, it doesn't need to breathe, so it'll lose its lung capacity, and it'll get enough oxygen from the running water. It'll basically warp the frog. It's still a frog, but it's a warped frog, and it's warped by the environment. You're not getting any new instruction there. You're only altering what's already there. You're not writing instruction for it to be something other than what it is. But I'd like to, I would seriously like to talk to any scientist or biologist or astrophysicist or anybody who thinks they can defend their mythology, to have a informal discussion or debate or whatever, and see if they can put their money where their mouth is, see if they can back up their statements, which we know they can't. But then they're teaching other people's children lies, and that's what the problem is, and that's why we don't accept it. We don't accept it because it's not actual history. It's a belief with no basis whatsoever, no scientific basis. It's not a scientific theory, it's a mythological belief. No science in it whatsoever. So this is it's a horrible thing to be teaching lies in school, and to have NASA looking for aliens that aren't there, probably, and you get everyone's hopes up. Oh, we're gonna find aliens. We're gonna find life. We're gonna prove that we came from nowhere. We came from the mud, primordial soup or something. We're going to give all the glory to mindless matter. That's what, and then they get everybody's hopes up, all excited and everything. Oh, we're going to find aliens. We're going to find extraterrestrial life, and then it's going to be a big letdown for all the kids in school, for all of the adult kids teaching the nonsense. That, oh, there's no life, and everybody's going to be all depressed because you built somebody up with a bunch of lies of something that doesn't exist, instead of saying, well, let's go see what's there, without saying, oh, it's got water there, it has to have life. No, it doesn't have to have life, and if it does have life, it has to be ordered. It has to be commanded. You can't have life without it being commanded, without a set of instructions, written instructions, a written program for there to be life. It's not complicated. It's not even rocket science. It's basic logic. And these scientists, even rocket scientists, can't even use basic logic to understand that evolution is absurd nonsense. It's not even worth any discussion whatsoever. It's not even worth any time whatsoever. It's flat earth belief. Evolution is a flat earth belief. It's mythology. It's baseless. It's mindless. It has no evidence whatsoever. And they try to rewrite history in order to fit their belief in evolution. So they got to rewrite all of history, everyone's genealogy. They got to rewrite all of our genealogy, all of our history, all of our archaeology. They got to force fit geology, make geology fit their belief, when geology doesn't fit the belief. History doesn't fit the belief. The calendars don't fit their belief. The historical records don't fit their belief, because they're believing lies. They're believing nonsense, absurd nonsense, baseless nonsense, and they got to stop it. You got to stop lying to other people's kids. They're not your kids, and you got to stop lying to them, because you're giving people a whole bunch of nonsense to believe in, which is a religious belief, a baseless religious belief. And you turn around and reject the truth, what we have evidence for. So you reject the truth, what there's evidence for, and you believe a lie. And then you go and teach other people's kids a lie, that you have no right to teach other people's kids the mythological belief in evolution. You have no right to teach other people's kids a lie. You have no right to teach anyone a lie. You have to back it up. You have to prove it before you teach anyone anything. You have to prove that you can get written instruction that's not there. And if you can't do that, then throw it out. Throw it out. It's mythology. It's imagination. It's a false belief. It's a baseless belief. You have no evidence. Every claim of evolution has always been disproved, and it always will be disproved. Every claim that is made, every evolutionary claim that is made will always be disproved every time, because it's a lie. It has no support. It has no basis. There is no Tiktaalik that's going to prove evolution, because you can't get written instruction that's not there. and everything is different. The Y chromosome of troglodytes is not the same as our Y chromosome. It's totally different. There's no relation. And if you go by the evidence, you'll see that troglodytes have a lot of information that we don't have, a lot of instruction that we don't have, and we have a lot of instruction in our DNA that troglodytes don't have. We're different animals. We're different. We're made to be, everything about us is different. Every part of us is different. We're made to be different creatures. At the most fundamental level of DNA, we're not made to be the same thing. That's why we're different. And you can't get instruction that's not there. If you have instruction to be a troglodyte, you're going to be a troglodyte. If you have instruction to be a human, you're going to be a human. Stop teaching the nonsense. You can't change from one thing to another. It'll always be a variation of what was there originally, the original kind. And not this vague term of species, which has no strict definition. Because according to species, one thing turns into another, and that's not even true. It's the same animal with the same information that turn on and off different things in order to adapt to the environment. That's all that's happening. You're turning on and off what's already there. You're not writing instruction that's not there. You're not getting direction that's not there. I mean, you can point to any specific mutation you want. It's not going to write billions of bits of programming that aren't there, because it's one change. And all the changes are errors, and they're all unrelated. They're unrelated to the genome that's there. They're unrelated to the other errors, and they're never going to write instruction, specific instruction to be something that's not there. Not in a million years, not in a billion years, not in any amount of time. I mean, it's already been proven that you can't have infinite possibilities in limited amount of time and space. And what you need to make a living organism is infinite possibilities, and the infinite possibilities is the realm of God. It's not the realm of physical things. It's not the realm of physical possibilities, because physical things can't do anything. Nothing. They don't do anything. They don't do anything with intent or purpose. They don't have any direction whatsoever. They don't have a mind. The only way you can get a mind is if you program, write the programming, make the software, make the hardware. Then you can have a mind. And that's all with intent and purpose. That is never by chance. But it's basic idolatry. It's basic object worship, object credit giving. It's not science. You are not teaching science to kids. You're teaching mythology and idolatry to children. And you need to stop. It's just total nonsense. I invite any scientist to come on here and prove otherwise. You're never going to do it. You never have, you never will. It's not complicated. We already know what makes us. We already know what we're made of. We already know all of the elements that we consist of. We know that we're made by a pre-existing written set of instructions from the beginning. Because there has to be a beginning, because you can't get instruction from no instruction. You can't get energy from less energy. Energy has to come from a greater source of energy and a greater source of energy until you arrive at God. Instruction, working mechanisms, function, directed function has to come from a greater source of intelligence and a greater source until you have an all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful, infinite maker of time and space, time and distance, limited time and distance that he's not limited to. I mean, that's what the evidence is. If you want to teach something, teach that. Because that's what the evidence shows, and that's what the goat herders taught us. So the goat herders know more science than you know as an object credit giving mythology believer and that you are. The goat herders understood more than you and your nonsense. Hey Wildheart, what's up? I finally got this stuff more or less working, and I can probably use Skype too, but I don't know if I can print the link for the Skype. Somehow, for some reason, it doesn't paste. I haven't figured out how to paste it here yet. Except I might be able to paste it somewhere else if I can find it. If I know where I'm going. This is not working. Anyway. Well, skip it. Anyway. Okay, DNA came a long time after the start of the universe, so it wasn't from the beginning. Cool video. Is that live? No, it's a looped video, loop-de-loop. But okay, well, let's go through this. DNA came a long time after the start of the universe, so it wasn't from the beginning. Well, DNA doesn't come from anything to begin with, but where did the universe come from? The universe came from energy. Where did the energy come from? The energy came from a greater source of energy. Where did a greater source of energy come from? It came from a greater and greater source of energy. Where does instruction come from? It has to come from a higher intelligence. You can't get greater matter, you can get greater energy from less and less energy. It has to be more and more energy, the source. Because energy can't make itself. Energy can't order itself. It can't come from itself. It can't come from a lesser and lesser source. It can only come from a greater and greater source. Also, he said intelligence has to come from a greater intelligence, so who created God? You should know better by now that God is not created. I mean, what what absurd. I mean, every atheist always asks the same question as if they don't even listen to what the answer is. God is not created. God is the creator. He always existed. That's what eternal is. That's what an eternal being is. Micah 5:2 says that a ruler from the days of eternity will be born in Bethlehem. Okay, that's what the goat herders said. The goat herders understood that God is eternal. He has to be eternal. Our Maker has to be eternal. The source of everything there is has to be eternal. Then intelligence doesn't always come from a greater intelligence. Yes, it does. Yes, because until you arrive at the all-knowing, all-powerful, eternal God, infinite wisdom, and the Bible does say infinite wisdom, infinite understanding, infinite power. There is no end to the wisdom, understanding, and counsel of God. It's infinite. That's what infinite is. That's the definition of God. The goat herders understood that. Scientists can't understand it. You know, all their math equations arrive at infinity and they say, oh, this is a problem. No, it's not a problem. It's the answer. The answer is an infinite, all-knowing God, all-powerful God. If no one created God, then intelligence doesn't always come from a greater intelligence. Yes, it does, because it has to come, you have to keep going back until you get to the infinite intelligence. Once you get to infinite intelligence, there's no end to the intelligence. It's all wisdom, all understanding. It's infinite. It's more than our little minds can understand. But that's what the evidence shows. And that's what the goat herders understood, that your scientists can't wrap their head around, because they just don't want to believe what the evidence is showing. Now all the equations are going to infinity, multiple infinities, and they don't want to believe it. All the evidence is of God. It's pointing directly to the all-powerful, all-knowing maker of everything there is. What you mean is intelligence always comes from a greater intelligence except for God. Well, but you don't understand still of what infinite and eternal is. No, it's the linear evidence that is going straight to God and nowhere else. It's not special pleading, it's not circular reasoning, it's what the evidence is showing. It's what the evidence shows. The evidence does not show that objects make your mom and dad. The evidence does not show that. That is a mythical belief. That is imagination. That is not based on fact. You have to go with the evidence. You have to go with the truth. The truth is that only your Maker can remake you again. Nobody else can. There is no other truth. It's not a religion, it's truth. Evolution is a religion. Evolution is a baseless belief, false belief. Evolution is all lies. Evolution has nothing to stand on. It's special pleading, everything follows this rule except for God. No, because it's infinity. It's infinite. God is infinite. And you have to understand what infinite is. It's never ending. Never ending understanding, never ending power, never ending existence. It's not something we can wrap our heads around as finite, limited beings in finite, limited time and distance. But all the evidence is pointing to infinity. This is what the evidence is showing. The evidence is of God, nothing else. The evidence is not that matter made itself and ordered itself and directed itself. That's not what the evidence is. The evidence is that there is a maker of matter that made the 17 essential elements and the same amount of beneficial elements, and programmed the elements using nanotechnology inside of us. It's 6,000-year-old nanotechnology that's not obsolete yet, by the way. It's a technology that's been around for 6,000 years and isn't obsolete yet. It's still special pleading if God is infinite. No, it's not if God is infinite. God is infinite. Your Maker is infinite. That's a fact. It's not special pleading. It's a fact. It's what the evidence shows. How can you have more and more energy as a source? Where's more and more energy going to come from? It's got to come from a greater and greater energy. It's got to come from an infinite source of energy. And the intelligence that made us has to be an infinite source of intelligence. It's infinite wisdom, infinite understanding, infinite power. That's what the evidence is. And I could talk to any scientist and they would never be able to prove otherwise. Maybe energy has always existed like God. No, energy is a physical thing that comes from God. Energy is a force. All power comes from God. All pharaohs and Zeuses and Thors get their power from God. They have their power given to them for a limited amount of time, mind you. And then they have no more power. Now we have a little bit of power, and we have our power for a limited amount of time. But all power comes from God. All power is from God. And He doesn't give His glory to anyone else. He doesn't share His glory with anyone else. Because there can only be one maker of everything there is. There can only be one all-powerful, all-knowing, eternal God. And that's what the evidence shows, and that's what the goat herders understood that scientists can't understand, even though their equations say the same thing. They just can't believe what the evidence is showing. So I would extend my invitation to an informal discussion to any scientist to prove that energy can make itself, or that energy can order itself, or that energy can order living organisms. I would like to extend an invitation to any scientist that can present evidence showing that there is such a thing as evolution. I've definitely mentioned this before, but if you start with the belief that God exists and created energy, that is what you will believe, whether it is true or not. Well, if you start out with a God, the belief in God, you're starting out with the truth, and so you don't have to believe anything else. You don't have to go through a roundabout way, always learning, never coming to the truth until you admit that all the evidence is of God. Because that's that was what helped me, it was my benefit, is that I started out with the truth. I started out with knowing the Lord. It's not circular reasoning, it's linear, and it's the truth. It's the only truth there is. There is no other truth. Show me another truth. You know, you can pick at the truth all you want all day long, and you have nothing of your own. Just like atheism has no point of discussion, or has no position on what is. Atheism doesn't have a position on what is. So atheism can't tell you anything about what is. It only claims to pick at the belief in God, and it fails miserably because all the evidence supports God. And we already know there are gods, because, you know, gods are defined as powers. Jesus said, "You are gods." That's what a god is. That's how you define God. God is gods are powers, and pharaohs were real powers. Zeus was a real power. Thor was a real power. No, we're talking about reality. We're not talking about the imagination of evolution. We're talking about reality, where the real powers, and all powers get their power from God. You have to demonstrate that it's the truth, not just assert it. No, I have demonstrated over and over and over again that it's true. I've demonstrated over and over again that you can't get power and energy from less and less energy. You have to get it from a greater and greater source of energy, which has to arrive ultimately at an infinite source of power. Infinite possibilities, infinite potential. Infinite potential, that's what we're talking about. That's what the evidence shows, infinite potential. Infinite wisdom, infinite understanding. It's a linear argument. It's not circular, it's linear. You're going straight to the source. It's a one-way ticket straight to the source. It's not circular, it's not baseless. It's not anything that you would like to say it is. What's circular about following evidence straight to an infinite source? That's not circular. It's linear, and it's straight to the source. You're not even using circular, or you're not demonstrating that it's circular. You're saying it's circular, but you're not demonstrating that it's circular. You have to demonstrate that it's truth. Can you show me a definition of God that says God is powers? Yeah. God said you are gods. You are all gods. Nevertheless, you'll die like men. That's what Jesus said. That's the definition of a god. You are a god. Sorry if my comments seem aggressive. It's hard to argue without sounding angry. No, you're doing a good job. You're doing maybe even a better job than me, but you haven't demonstrated that the reasoning is circular. It's linear, not circular. We're taking what the evidence is, what the facts are, and going to the source, which is infinity. Even the math says it's infinity. All of the math leads to infinity. God is the truth because I believe God is the truth. Circular reasoning. No. God is the truth because that's what the facts show. The facts will take you straight to the truth. It's not, you can't project what you think I believe as to what I believe, because what you think I believe is not what I believe, because I believe the evidence goes straight to the source, and the source is infinite potential, infinite wisdom, infinite understanding and power. There is no other evidence. It's a one-way ticket to God. Whether you know it, like it, or or want it to be, that's what the evidence shows. And it's not circular. It's not, I believe in God because I believe in God. God is the truth because I believe God is the truth. It's not that way. The truth is that matter can't make itself. The truth is that living organisms can't write their own instruction. The truth is that energy can't order itself, and it's going to disorder. That means a greater source of energy had to make the universe. That means a greater source had to make that. It's linear, it's not circular. It's following the evidence, it's following the yellow brick road. But you describe the evidence leads to God before you had seen any of the evidence because you were taught that. Well, that's what I said before, is that I started from a factual base. I started with the truth. I started with the truth, and I never had to deviate from the truth, because the truth is always born out to be true. It's always born out to be true that we were made to exist and that only our Maker can remake us again. It'll always be true. It'll never not be true. It'll always be true that God is that all power comes from God, and God is infinite. Infinite potential, infinite wisdom, infinite understanding. And I'm not making this up. This is what was written thousands of years ago. This is what the goat herders understood from the evidence. And this is what scientists today can't understand. You know, this is basics. This is fundamental, foundational. It's foundational understanding, science. And you know it is the truth because you were taught it, the truth, not based on the evidence. Well, I was, they believed in the truth too. I mean, they understood that the truth is evident, creation is evident. We believe the truth, and the Bible says creation is evident. That's the truth. The truth is that the evidence is of creation by a greater maker. That's what the evidence is. It's evident. The creation is evident. That we can't make ourselves, and we can't save ourselves. We can't remake ourselves, and we couldn't possibly preserve ourselves forever. Why do you think some of the generation are the greatest minds? I don't care who they are. Their mind is not great. Their mind is pathetic. And you can bring them here to talk to me. They are pathetic. They are not great minds. They're pathetic. They're totally pathetic. Bring them here to me, and I'll show you. I'll prove how pathetic their minds are. Their reasoning is. That's the whole point of this video and this invitation right here, is to invite anyone who thinks they know something to come here and to explain something to me, because their thinking is pathetic. Their belief is pathetic. They believe in mythology. They believe in nonsense. They believe in their own imagination. They believe in idolatry and objects. Well, yeah. No, but you don't have to belittle yourself. They are not the greatest minds. And that's the whole point. If I can understand it, and I came from the Amazon, and it's not complicated, then anyone can understand it. That's the whole point of jungle jargon. Is that if you can't, show that I'm wrong, then your reasoning is totally pathetic. You have no excuse. because if I can understand it, anybody should be able to understand it, because it's not complicated. And they, appeal to authority is a fallacy, by the way. They don't have a great mind. Their minds are not working. Their minds are not working because they believe in mythology. They believe in imagination, baseless facts. They're hoping against the truth that they are right, and they have no basis whatsoever to believe what they believe. It's a belief. It should not be taught to children because it's a belief, and it's a baseless belief. So if they can't prove it, they shouldn't be teaching it. The Bible is mythology by definition. No, it's not. It's history by definition. Saying I'm going to believe this until someone proves me wrong is also a fallacy. No, not if you believe in the truth. Not if what you're believing is true. And the Bible says you can know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I know the truth. I know that mindless matter can't do anything of its own. I know it can't write instruction. I know it can't write instruction that's not there. I know that unrelated changes to an existing genome will never write programming that's not there. Never. Never in any amount of time. Never. Never. It's not possible, because everything falls apart at a much greater rate than it ever supposedly puts itself into directed working order. It doesn't put itself into directed working order, and it falls apart. So no amount of time will ever be enough to make a living organism anywhere in the universe. Okay, saying I'm going to believe until an appeal to authority isn't always fallacious. Well, it is when you're appealing to mythology. It's fallacious. Only if it's not genuine. Well, genuine authority comes from God. We already know that. We who are believers in God know that authority comes from God. We know that if someone speaks presumptuously, which the Bible is full of examples of people speaking presumptuously and paying for it, that you're not supposed to listen to them. And evolution is presumptuous. The authority comes from God. Truth comes from God. It does not come from mindless matter. It does not come from your imagination. Your imagination is image making. You're making images in your mind that aren't real. They're fake. They're not based on evidence. They're not based on fact. An appeal to authority isn't always fallacious. Yeah, it is. Especially unless you appeal to God, which is the authority, it's fallacious. You mean you know what authority, that authority comes from God. I know that authority comes from God. Yes, because not even Jesus spoke of his own initiative, that he spoke what God told him to say, and he did what God told him to do. So authority has to come from God. Authority cannot come from us. In other words, authority is supernatural. It's invisible. It's not physical. So your appeal to God as an authority must also be fallacious. No, because that's where all the evidence shows. The evidence shows that God has all authority, all power, and he's eternal, and it has infinite wisdom. That's what the evidence shows. It's not appealing to an authority without evidence. All the evidence shows that all power comes from God. There's no authority that shows that evidence comes from mindless matter that can't even make itself or order itself or write any programming. That's your belief, and that's a false belief, and that's the scientist's belief. It's called naturalism. It's called idolatry. It's called object credit giving. That you believe things made themselves and everything is from material. That material is from material, and material made material, and everything is material. And that's just a false belief. It's a baseless belief. It's idolatry in the biblical sense. What about energy we create in power stations? How does that come from God? No, please don't ask a question like that. Please. You can't. It's a law of science that you cannot make energy. You cannot make energy. You're using energy that's already there. You're just putting in a usable format, in a format that we can readily use. Because we can't use the power rushing over a waterfall. We can use electrical power and batteries. Please don't say something like that. I mean, you guys say this stuff all the time, but please. At least we can demonstrate that materials exist. Yes, materials exist. They do exist, and we know that they're forced to be what they are. Unlike anything supernatural. No, supernatural just means that it's not a physical force. So this, in other words, the concatenation of living organisms, the sequence of the information of living organism is not a physical thing. It's not. There is no physical thing that can write programming. That's a supernatural thing. Physical things themselves, matter itself, cannot make itself. It has a supernatural origin. Everything has a supernatural origin. Everything is evidence of the supernatural. Because it can't make itself, it can't order itself. That's a law of science. That's a fact. Stephen Hawking says, because of gravity, everything exists. No, you can't have gravity until you have matter, you dumb. But okay, so supernatural means not natural. We are currently have no way to demonstrate anything not natural. Yeah, I just did. Your programming that makes you a human is not natural. It's of a supernatural origin. The existence of matter is not natural. It doesn't come from itself. It can't make itself. It can't order itself. Energy can't make itself. It can't order itself. So matter can't exist by itself, or can't exist by energy that it doesn't have. Everything is forced to be what it is. All the elements are what they are because of energy, what energy forces them to be. Your demonstrations only involve saying what you believe. No, it's what the evidence shows. It's what's observable. That's the difference between me and naturalists or evolutionists, is that I have evidence, they have no evidence. I follow the evidence, what the evidence shows. They follow their imagination and belief without any basis whatsoever. That's the whole point of me inviting them here, to show what kind of basis they have for their object credit giving belief. Everything exists because of something greater. because of an infinite potential. That's what all the math shows. All their equations, they get all frustrated and everything because all their equations end up with infinity. And that's what the evidence is. It's infinite potential. That's what the evidence is. Infinite wisdom, infinite understanding, infinite power, eternal existence. That's what the evidence is. We are a fabrication because of energy that makes matter, that makes gravity, that dilates time and distance. It makes everything, instead of being infinite time, it brings things down to limited seconds, limited time, limited distance. It contracts distance and shortens time. It makes time limited and distance limited in order to make a physical fabrication, in order to program the physical fabrication, in order to make our existence possible, in order for us to glorify God and say He's all power belongs to Him. He's the one who made everything. Not for us to lie and say that we made ourselves and that we are something when we're nothing. We're just matter that's forced to be what it is. And either we tell the truth or we lie. And we're supposed to be telling the truth. All we have to do is tell the truth. There's no reason for us not to tell the truth. If anybody doesn't tell the truth, it's just evidence that God's proving them to be a devil. That's all that is. No, you were taught it was the truth. Luckily, you believe it was the truth. After you were taught it was the truth, circular reasoning. No, I was taught the truth, and it always was true. It always bore itself out to be true. When it bears itself out to be true, it's not circular reasoning. And if it didn't bear itself out to be true, I wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't even be here talking. The reason why I'm here is because it bears itself out to be true, and no scientist can prove otherwise. No scientist can prove that any object ever did anything of its own volition. You know, this is not complicated. And, if I can understand it, anyone can understand it, and the scientists are a disgrace to science. They're a total, absolute disgrace to science. They have no basis to teach what they believe, and I'm giving them a chance for them to show their basis, and they're always afraid to show that they have a basis because they know they have no basis for saying that the material world is responsible for the material world. They have no basis whatsoever for saying that, because it can't make itself, it can't order itself, and it can't make living organisms. It can't do anything they claim it does. So it's all lies. It's all lies. None of it is true. Luckily, you believe it was true. No, it's not circular reason. It's born out to be true. It's evidentially true. Creation is evident. That's what the Bible says. The goat herders got it right. The scientists don't even know where they are, hardly. They don't have a clue. I'd invite anybody. I'm not afraid of anybody. It could be any scientist in the world to come and explain how energy would order itself, how energy would make itself, how living organisms would program themselves or reprogram themselves, or right instruction that's not there, right programming that's there. I'm inviting them to come here and to explain that. Now's your chance to prove that you're not teaching a religion, a baseless witch doctor belief. Evolution is a baseless witch doctor belief. It's mythology. It's baseless. It's idolatry. You know that unfalsifiable claims are not a good Good thing. Saying scientists can't prove you wrong doesn't mean anything. Well, sure it does mean something. It means they can't prove their object credit giving belief. Because it's absurd to begin with. Because there's zero, all the evidence is on my side. None evidence is on their side. No evidence is on their side. They have no factual basis. They have no scientific position. They have no scientific basis. Science is what you can absolutely prove to be a fact, and they cannot prove evolution to be a fact because it's a witch doctor belief. Evolution is a witch doctor's belief. They can't prove you wrong because your claim is unfalsifiable. No, it's listen to me. It's not a claim. It's an observation. It's an observation that all the evidence goes to infinity. The math goes to infinity. It's an observation. It's not a claim. It's an observation. And nobody can show me any other thing because I just told you what the observation is. Nobody can observe any other thing. It's an observation. Try to get that through the head, I'd like to talk to any scientist, anyone. Sean Carroll, Neil deGrasse Tyson, people talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think he's cool. But, Sean Carroll, Lawrence Krauss doesn't even know where he's at, hardly. But anyway, anybody. It's a claim that it's an observation. No, it is an observation. I observe it. I observe written instruction inside of you. I observe that matter cannot make itself. I observe that matter cannot program itself. I observe infinite regression of infinite potential. I observe that. That's what the evidence shows. That's what the math shows. And there's no scientist that can tell me any other thing because they can't observe any other thing because there is no other thing to observe. It's a claim that it's an observation. No, it's not a claim. It's an observation. You can know it. And if you can't know it, you can't tell me anything. If you can't observe it, there's nothing you can tell me. I'm telling you, it's my observation, and if you can't observe anything else, there's nothing you can tell me. And of course, nobody can observe anything else because what I'm telling you is scientific fact, observable, verifiable fact. It's what you can know to be a fact. Okay, now what would happen if we did see the formation of a living organism? Would that prove that matter did it? No, it'd prove the evidence of a supernatural. It's ironic that you're saying that God is an observation even though he is unobservable. Well, you expect to see the infinite potential? God said you can't see infinite potential because you would die. There's that. I mean, it's not complicated. How are you gonna observe God? I mean, the only way you can observe God is if you see Jesus, the only begotten Son of God. That's the only way you can see God. You've seen me, you've seen God. That's the only way to see God. And there's a whole bunch of prophecy about that. And, it took place. They never did find his body because he resurrected. because there was no body to be found. All of Rome couldn't find his body because there was no body there to be found because he resurrected. Not my problem. It's a problem for anyone that claims to have seen God. Well, whether you've seen God or not, it doesn't matter. The facts are still facts. You know, it's still a fact. All of science. In fact, Newton wrote his thing on physical sciences. His what do they call it, a theory of physical science or something like that. The reason why he called it a theory because he didn't want what he was saying to be confused with the Word of God. That's why he called it a theory of physical science. But everything that he was saying and doing, Newton was proving God, the existence of God. And the whole purpose of him teaching science was to prove the existence of God, to prove that there is a God. And he wrote more about God than he did about science. So there's that too. All of Rome didn't search for Jesus. Well, they did basically. But they gave up real quick because they knew that he'd risen. That's kind of the point. They said they told people to tell people that the body was stolen. That's what they told people to say. Probably because Newton knew the church would silence him if he didn't say it. Yeah, right. Because he can't be speaking of his own initiative and saying it's absolute truth. So that's why but he was trying to explain to people that physical things are evidence of God. That's what the whole purpose was of his theory of physical science. Well, I don't know, it's an interesting title, his titles. So everyone in Rome went over to search for Jesus. Where is that in the Bible? That's not what I said. If you listen, they gave up real quick because they knew that he was risen. And then they told a lie. They told everybody to say that they came and stole the body, which is absurd. Because how are the disciples going to steal the body from Roman guards? You know, it's absurd. You said all of Rome. Yeah, all the power of Rome. So if somebody did steal the body, you have all the power of Rome at your disposal. And they never did find a body because there was no body to be found, and they didn't even look for it because they knew he had risen. That's the point. That's kind of the point, you know. You gotta think about it a while before you try to respond, you know. I mean, people have been over and over this many times, you know. Just read Josh McDowell, Evidence Demands a Verdict, and More Evidence Demands a Verdict. You know, that's what I'm saying is 20 years old or 30 years old or more. You said all the power of Rome. Now you seem to add words to your statements when it is convenient. No, I said all the power of Rome. I said all the power of Rome couldn't keep him in the ground. Or he couldn't account for his body anyway. And it doesn't matter how much you pick with what I'm saying, it's still, they couldn't find the body because the body wasn't there. The body, he had risen. So they didn't even try. Instead, they told people to say that his body was stolen, which is absurd. Because the guards would have been executed instantly. No, you said all of the Rome originally. Go back and check. No, I don't even care what I said. They never found his body. That's the point. And they had all the power of Rome at their disposal to find it. If somebody did find a body, they would have come up with a body and said, here's the body of Jesus. See, here he is. And they didn't do it because they couldn't do it, because he had risen. You know, people have been over and over this thing many, many times. It's just atheists that don't understand it because they never thought about it, you know. See, how do you know aliens didn't steal Jesus' body or Doctor Who? Because there's no evidence of aliens or Doctor Who in real life. See, it always goes back to the evidence. This always goes back to, what does the evidence show? What is the evidence? What is the scientific evidence? You know, it's so much fun when you're always right and everybody else is always wrong, and they can't ever find anything wrong. When you're telling the truth, there's no way of being wrong, and there's no way of being proved wrong. That's why I like discussions or arguments where I always win. I don't like to lose discussions or arguments, you know. If I can't win, I'm not going to argue. It's like, anyway. See, and what is the evidence that Jesus was resurrected? I just told you what the evidence was. Anonymous Gospels written decades after the fact. I just told you what the evidence was. It's the Roman guards that were put at his grave that could not keep him in the ground. That's the evidence. Because they never did say, look, here's the body of Jesus. We found it. Because it wasn't there because he had risen. That's the evidence. And, you know, there's prophetic evidence too. A lot of prophetic evidence, if you know about that. There's personal experience evidence. You know, there's all kinds of evidence. Roman guards does not prove a resurrection. Well, it does when they can't find a body. I mean, even aside from Rome, anybody could have said, look, here's the body. And they couldn't do it because there was no body, because he had resurrected. See, that's all you would have needed. All you would have needed was to produce the body. And it's not like you can get rid of a body like that that's being guarded by Roman guards. And all they had to do was wait 3 days, and within 3 days they couldn't produce a body anymore because he wasn't there, he had risen. So, you know, this is stuff that, you know, like they say in Brazilian, we're bald from knowing. Careca de saber. These things. We know these things so well, and other people never even heard of it before. And it's just crazy, but the evolution's got to stop. Evolutionism, the myth of evolution and witch doctor teaching has to be stopped. You have to stop teaching witch doctor teaching to children, because that's what evolution is witch doctor teachings. Baseless mythology, mythological idolatry belief. It's idol worship, object credit giving. Right, so you believe Jesus was resurrected because the Bible says so. No body doesn't equal a resurrection. You don't understand that there were people there. There were people there. Rome was there. The Jews were there. They all were there, and nobody could produce the body. Nobody could say, look, here's the body of Jesus. You don't seem to understand. It doesn't seem to sink in. There is no body of Jesus because he resurrected. It's not complicated. See, that's what I'm saying. This was a different time, different circumstances, and they knew the claim was that he was going to be raised. So they put guards over the tomb so that nobody could steal the body. And then when the resurrection took place, they turned around and said, oh, they stole the body. So it's not the same. It's not the same thing. This was a big deal. This was a big event. It would be like Jeffrey Epstein, the body of Jeffrey Epstein disappearing. That's what it would be like. Well, where's the body? I don't know. It's not here. What do you mean it's not here? You're supposed to guard it. What happened to it? Where's the video camera? You know. Let's go to the videotape. It's there's so much evidence for biblical teaching. There is no evidence to the contrary. It was so big of an event that no one mentions it for 40 to 50 years. Well, because of the fact that people are sinners. Of course they didn't mention it. They didn't want to mention it. You know, why would they mention it if they know what the ramifications are of the resurrection of Jesus? The only people, and it's not for 40 or 50 years, it's a lie. The only people that taught the resurrection were people that believed it. And there have always been people that believed it. People died for it. There's a history of it. People dying for it from the beginning, from the Pentecost, which is the 50 weeks, which is the time when the Holy Spirit came on people. Because Jesus said he would send the Holy Spirit. And he did send the Holy Spirit as evidence, as a sign. So historians only write about things they like. Yeah. So you have all kinds of people saying that Israel didn't even exist, and then it's proved that Israel did exist. So, it happens all the time. And the truth is true anyway. You can't change the truth. The truth is that only your Maker can remake you. Nobody else can. Only your Maker can be your Savior. Nobody else can. The truth is what the evidence shows, and no one can ever change it. No blah 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 can ever change it. No dissent, no skepticism, nothing can change it. The facts are what they are. They're facts. So why did no historians at the time write about the resurrection? It was the believers that believed in the resurrection that wrote about the resurrection, which was copied and recopied and recopied and copied and recopied. They're the ones that wrote about the resurrection. Okay? You have to get that straight. People did write about it. They made copies and copies and copies. There's so many copies of the copies that they made that it turns out there's more evidence of the resurrection of Jesus than there is of the existence of historical figures like whoever, whichever one you want to pick at the time. So it's not true that there's no historical evidence. There's plenty of historical evidence, and there's plenty of context, and there's plenty of background, and plenty of supporting prophecies, plenty of prophecies after the fact. There were prophets after, in the New Testament, after the resurrection, there was still prophets. There was still miracles, there was prophets, prophecy, all kind of stuff after the resurrection. And it continues to this day. There's people throughout the whole world that believe in the resurrection. You wore me out, JJ. Need a nap. Thanks for the chat. Laters. Yeah, nice talking to you, Hart. I'd hope to wear out every scientist, that wants to teach the mythological belief in evolution, the witch doctor belief in evolution. That would be great. Just an open invitation to any scientist out there. I win again. I don't like to argue if I can't win. Yeah. But it's the evidence. It's what the evidence shows. That's what you have to teach in school. If you want to teach something in school, teach the history, teach the evidence, teach the science, teach thermodynamics. Teach what the mathematical equations show of everything, of always arriving at infinity. Teach that. Teach infinite potential. You're teaching fact. That's fact. Infinite potential. That's what the evidence shows. Infinite wisdom. Infinite understanding. Infinite power. That's what the evidence shows. And I have to go too. I only extended it because I was talking to Wildheart. But yeah, I have a life too. I'm still not totally free from having to work. But hopefully someday I will be. God bless everybody. Hope the best for you, and hope you believe the truth and accept the truth of God, and have a personal relationship with God, acknowledging the truth and walking in truth, walking in the light of God's word, the truth of God's word. It all makes sense. All right, over and out.